Joreget, Alessandro nog, nog. That's the extent of my German. So I hope you will not mind the change of pace. We will go into English now. So in the next 15 minutes, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we like to do. At Steelcase, we like to apply social sciences to the workplace, sciences like anthropology, sociology, psychology. And from that, we derive insights by observation. So what I'd like to share with you is a mix of research and empirical observations that have led us to a few ideas that I will share with you on how the space where we work can help us enhance innovation and the ability to foster creativity. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that there was a time a few years ago when people were saying, you know, people will not go to the office anymore. The office is obsolete. It doesn't make sense anymore to have offices. Why? Because of technology, because of coffee shops or places where people could go and get work done. But time has never been as great as today for workplaces. There is a renewed level of interest. And this level of interest, we think from conversations we have with customers every day, is very much related to the fact that people like you, people who are experts in talent management, are telling us that there is a drive for growth. Growth is very often fueled by innovation, and innovation is very much linked to culture. Therefore, helping an organization to create an environment that fosters a culture of innovation and creativity becomes a fundamental aspect. But people are also telling us that something is not really working. We go to work, yet at work we don't find the environment that can really allow us to work on that creativity, on fostering innovation. People get interrupted too often. People don't find the spaces where they can really collaborate and work with one another. And when we hear this, then we go and we think, okay, but that's mainly related to the fact that people are thinking about an old office. And one thing that we need to keep in mind is that there was a time when we used to go to the office, and the office was the place where we would have a file cabinet, we would have an access to the network. Today, this is no longer the case. We don't really need to go to an old office. We can do all of these things from home. People want to go to places that look more like this, places where people are inspired, places where people can find the ability to collaborate with people, find a sense of materiality that is really what they would cherish in an environment that triggers new ideas. They want variety. They want places that look more like their home. And what they're telling us is that this is the place where they would rather be if they need to develop some kind of work. But what is this telling us is that organizations are really putting a lot of emphasis toward creativity. And there is one thing we know, is that very often creativity is wrongly associated to arts, music, painting. Reality is that creativity is actually an ecosystem of ideas in an organization that allows, through iterations, to develop new concepts. So all of us, all of the people, all of the talents who are part of an organization are actually in this game to make organizations more successful in terms of innovation. And studies say that leaders agree that creativity is really one of the biggest drivers, one of the biggest needs that they have in their organizations, yet they also tell us that very often their space where they're working is not supporting their needs. So are we creating the right conditions for creativity? And that's where the expertise of the organization I work for, Steelcase, comes into place. For more than 100 years, we have observed how people work. We have tried to understand if those behaviors are giving us an indication of what people like and what they dislike. And we say that people vote with their feet. So what if you created an organization where you didn't tell any longer people that they have to come to work from 8 to 5, but you'd rather put yourself on the challenge of saying, might I create an environment where people are free to go to work if they choose to do so? And my task is actually creating the right conditions for that place to create attraction. So what we see is that in general, there is a good attempt to move in a certain direction. So many of you may work in places that look like this. So what do these places tell us? They tell us that there is an effort to create more transparency, more collaboration for people to come together. This is happening everywhere. It's happening in Asia, it's happening in Europe, It's happening in the Americas, where there used to be cubicles. But we also hear that this is not sufficient any longer. We hear that people are asking for places like this. These are places that you can call home feeling. We call them resimercial. We call them ancillary. We call them in a lot of different ways. But what they are telling us is that in this place, people want to come together in a less formal way to collaborate and share ideas. But unfortunately, when we go to see customers every day, when we go and talk to them, you know what? I go to these offices, and these offices are just empty like that. So these spaces are actually not being utilized. So at the end of the day, what are they? It's a little bit of a showroom. It's a little bit of a vignette, something that you're doing to project an image that would tell your employees, come and work in an environment that looks like this. But the reality is that when I go there on Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock, they just look like that. And I say, why? And they tell me, well, people are busy today, nobody's here. The reality is that they are voting with their feet and they're choosing not to use this place. So the question is something missing? Those places are not wrong. What I showed in the previous slides are actually good design, good ideas, but that's not sufficient. This is not what is going to do it. And to do that, we went and we started asking ourselves, what is the creative process? When you think about an idea that you developed in your organization, how did that idea come about? So we went and talked to neurologists. We went to talk to people who understand the creative process. And one thing we learned is that definitely one thing we know is that the creative process doesn't look like that. The creative process is not the object of something that happens in a very linear way. That image, for those of you who deal with project management, can remind you of a Gantt chart. For those of you who use Outlook calendar, may remind you of the 30-minute increments in your calendar. Ideas are not generated like that. This is one thing we know. And the moment we try to organize our space that way, because I want to say one thing, does it look familiar? Does it look like the layout of your office, where people are lined up in a way that looks a little bit like sort of like a manufacturing line of white collars? You have finance, you have HR, you have a lot of people like this. They are all organized in a certain way, and then we expect that that will generate a great idea. It will not happen. What we learn is that actually the creative process looks more like that. It looks messy. So, of course, don't take that as that's the creative process. That's an idea that in a way is telling us that the creative process is iterative, collaborative. It brings people together, but it doesn't happen in a series of sequences. The creative process, in fact, is happening, and again, think about an idea or something you're working on. Think about the moments where you are alone, you're doing focused work, and there are moments where you are collaborating with peers, colleagues, multifunctional teams. You're looking for opportunities to calibrate those ideas that you are developing. We know also that when you are in the process of working on a new project or working on something, a new product that your company is developing, there are different phases and different moments according to the audiences you're speaking to. So you may have moments where you're just sharing, informative, when you are creating mind share within your organization. There are moments that may be evaluative, where people from a hierarchical reason need to validate and vet what you have come up with. And then there are very important moments, generative moments, where an idea is growing, it's still like an infant, a child, and needs to be helped to be developed to something else. We also know that in organizations, there is something that is very frowned upon. It's daydreaming, what we call diffused state of attention. So diffused state of attention is this morning when you were coming here, you were commuting. This morning when I was coming here and I was commuting, I was thinking about things. Or this morning when you were showering. Or today, later, when you will go for a jog. These are moments of diffuse state of attention as opposed to focused state of attention. Well, research says that actually, and I think many of you will relate to that, the best ideas actually come under a shower. So the diffuse state of attention is a moment that typically doesn't happen in an office. You wonder why? It's because an office is really not generating the opportunity to create those diffuse state of attention. And the creative process, for those of you who use design thinking or are familiar with design thinking, has two fundamental moments. There is a moment that we call divergence. It's a moment where people are coming up with quantity of ideas. And then there is a moment that is convergent. It's a moment where those ideas are now filtered, and we need to find the golden nugget in the many input that we have received from people within the organization. So the creative, went back. So by analyzing the decision process, what we did in a very humble way is said, okay, every time a customer is talking to us and is telling us, innovation is my objective, our leadership are focused on that, we said, what is really generating an environment, a space where people are telling us, this is helping me to go faster to market, to collaborate better with my colleagues. It's a series of design principles and spatial attributes. So the first is create emotional connection. When you are in an office, when you are telling people that they are using a hot desk or they cannot really own what they own, you're in a way taking something away from them, and you need to give back. Giving back is the opportunity for teams to recognize themselves in the space where they work. It's by displaying artifacts. It's by displaying the pride of a team that you can recognize yourself in the space you are going to work. Very often, it's simply something like having a shelf where people have the ability to display the books that the team is reading and that are defining the culture of that small team. It's nurturing creative confidence. This is a fundamental element that in many hierarchical cultures is very often misunderstood. Space is allocated in an organization according to hierarchical levels. The big boss gets the biggest office. Reality is space needs to be democratic in the distribution, and people need to have the ability to access space according to the moment of the day and the need of the day. The more we create an office where people have immediate access to space and the ability to access that space in an equal way, independent from hierarchical levels, we are nurturing creating confidence. And then build a fluid ecosystem. What does it mean? You remember those pictures with the benches and the desks and the sofas? That's great, but we need more. We need a series of spaces where people can find throughout the day a variety of settings that will allow to spring their creativity and to really deliver on their expectations. So this is a little busy slide, but just think of it like each of them are dimensions in design. So in other words, when you design a space like this one, you can think about different attributes. And you can say, how much privacy is this space giving us? Well, not much. It's privacy amongst us, and not toward the external, but not between individuals. It's about posture. You're sitting low in an environment that is fairly deep, that doesn't really allow to create intimacy. Between me and the first row, there are already 6-7 meters. There is presence. So we are all in a physical location. I know that this is on social media, so there is a little bit of distance, collaboration, and proximity. So all these elements are elements that we need to thoroughly think through. Think about the dynamics. In a meeting, when you were sitting with a bunch of people and you were sitting down low. Sitting down low is immediately communicating something. It's communicating about the rhythm of that meeting, the flow of that meeting. It's communicating about the direction of that meeting. The more you move to an environment that instead has a posture that is a high posture, the more you are creating a space where people have the ability to more fluidly interact with one another. And when we think about these spatial attributes, we can take them and kind of like make a drink when you start mixing different ingredients. And every time you will come up with something that will look slightly different. Our head of design says, today organizations in reality are still only thinking, or mainly thinking, about the efficiency of the organization itself, not the human beings that are part of that organization. We need to design spaces that are taking into account the names of the individuals who are part of that organization, not the organization itself only. And the way we do it is really by thinking about the three spatial elements that in the end shape the culture of your organization. It's thinking about the people, and when you think about people, we need to take into consideration their well-being. Well-being means not only giving a comfortable chair. Well-being is putting them in a place where the cognitive element, the information they're exposed to, the emotional element, the way they are treated, are all elements that are allowing a person to perform at best. We need to give technology, but technology needs to be blended in the space in a way that makes a person perform better. Technology cannot be overwhelming, and technology can be blended with analog. We hear so often today that an excessive presence of technology is often hindering the ability to foster creativity. And finally, it's what I was saying before. You take all those spatial attributes, you mix them in different ways, and you create a series of an ecosystem of different spaces. We often think about this pyramid. You're probably familiar with this pyramid. The best way I can think of this pyramid is think about children. If you have children or you work with children, the only way you can get certain results is to get your children to really experience something, form an opinion that creates a belief that leads to a result. Good luck trying to tell a child 20 times, you have to do this. They will drift back to a behavior. Human beings in an organization are not different from a child. They go where humanly they want to go. Let me just close by saying that for us it was a heyday when we decided a year ago, a little bit longer than that, but a year ago is when we opened, to create an innovation center in Munich, that's where I work, where we wanted to try a lot of these ideas. So what you see there on the left is an example of how an ecosystem of spaces may look like. And what you're seeing there is 9 examples. I think we have something like more than 100 different examples, and nothing will look alike. What happens during the day is that people are selectively choosing where they need to work according to the spatial attributes that are determining what is that they want to achieve. So at the end of the day, the ability to create a space that, like this, that has allowed people to create frequent collisions between one another and opportunities to exchange in a very fluid way, today is giving us results that we are analyzing still from our stomach, make us think that this space is really generating speed to market in developing products, more connections, and more intimacy with people. I know that many of you ask, can you prove it? We're working on that, and I think that will be the next step to help use technology to help us to get there. Thank you for your attention.